The sun was setting over the quiet hills of Salton Ridge, painting the sky with deep ambers and rusted purples. Harper Miles knelt beside the irrigation valve, one booted foot pressed into the dry soil. She twisted the old cap with a grunt and listened for the welcome hiss of water flowing beneath. Nothing. Again, she sighed, pushing her auburn braid over one shoulder and wiping the back of her glove against her sweat-lined brow. Harper was 31, broad-shouldered, with a body built more for hauling broken machinery than preening in mirrors. Farming wasn't glamorous, especially not post-unification. The Galactic Accord hadn't done much for Earth's border colonies except add new taxes and strange customs agents who sneered at humans with calloused hands. She stood and gazed across the dusty plains, where auto-harvesters limped through rows of protein corn and hybrid grain. A solar flare weeks ago had knocked half the systems offline, and only one of her drones had bothered to reboot. Everything else had to be coaxed back to life like stubborn cattle. The government was supposed to send technicians to help, but so far, just silence. Harper was used to silence. After leaving her position as a junior mechanic with the Terran Navy, she'd cashed in what little she had and bought this broken-down piece of rock from a widow who couldn't keep up with it anymore. It had promise, though, deep aquifers, solar saturation, and enough land to vanish on. She liked vanishing. The only buzz of excitement she'd had in weeks came 2 days ago, when the old Starliner from Velith Minor docked at Tranquility Station. She'd gone into town for a coil relay and gotten swept into the crowd. The station was chaotic, filled with alien traders, mercenaries, pilgrims, and younglings taking photos with wide-eyed wonder. And then there'd been the dragon. Not a real dragon. Not like in old Terran legends, but close. Drakari, the species was called. Ancient, scaled, immense. Most stayed off-grid, nursing their centuries-long retirements in space crypts and silence. But this one had come alone, wings folded like rusted sails, spine hunched, eyes dull with exhaustion. It wore the tattered robes of a once noble warrior caste. No servants, no entourage, just heavy breath and forgotten honor. And it had been standing in her way. Harper had been lining up to board her return shuttle. Nothing fancy. A cramped row 18 seat in the mid-tier, when the crowd had frozen. The old Drakari hobbled through like a ghost, and the boarding agent looked stricken. She was arguing with her earpiece about diplomatic protocol, while passengers muttered nervously. No one wanted to sit near the thing. No one wanted to be the one who offended a species that had once incinerated moons for sport. The gate manager gestured helplessly to the first-class section. The dragon wheezed. That's when Harper had stepped forward. "Take my seat," she said. Her voice didn't carry far, but it was enough. The Drakari's eyes shifted toward her, amber, slitted, reptilian. Something flickered behind the ancient gaze. Curiosity? Amusement? She shoved the ticket into the agent's hand before they could argue. "It's closer to the front. Easier boarding ramp access. You look like you need it." The dragon's mouth curled slightly at the edge, revealing scorched ivory fangs. Then, without a word, it lumbered forward and accepted the offer. The crowd murmured. Someone laughed nervously. Harper shrugged and walked to the back, ignoring the stares. She hadn't thought much of it. Just a tired being, just a bit of decency. Now, weeks later, standing beside a dead irrigation system with failing drone systems and not a single neighbor within kilometers, Harper's thoughts kept drifting back to that moment. The way the old creature had paused before taking her place. The way its claws had brushed her shoulder lightly, almost imperceptibly as it passed. Like a benediction, or a curse. She blew out a breath and turned toward the shed. The solar interface might have fried again. Maybe she could. A low rumble split the sky. Harper froze. It wasn't thunder. The sky was clear, stars just starting to wink through the twilight. The rumble grew louder, deeper, and then sharper sounds cut through, distinct, rhythmic thrumming. Engines. Big ones. She turned fully and saw them. 3 silhouettes descending from the upper stratosphere, gleaming like dark knives against the fading light. Military cruisers. Black hulls with no markings. The kind she hadn't seen since her days with the fleet. Not patrol ships. Not supply vessels. Cruisers. Hell, she whispered. They weren't slowing. Her farm wasn't on any major routes. No one had business here. She hadn't filed any complaints, hadn't missed any payments, hadn't even left the planet since the shuttle ride. Why would the military be here? And why now? Dust kicked up around the old silo as the lead cruiser rotated midair and began its vertical descent, aiming directly for the central landing field, just 100 meters from her main barn. The others flanked out, wings shimmering with shield energy. Her heart pounded. She hadn't done anything wrong, unless giving up a seat to an old dragon counted. Unless that dragon hadn't been just old. Unless it had been important. She backed toward the porch, hand instinctively reaching for the old plasma tool still mounted near the door. The first cruiser touched down, throwing up a storm of dirt and static. The engines powered down with a scream, and the silence that followed felt heavier than stone. Then a ramp extended, and something began to walk down. Not soldiers, not Terran officers, but Drakari, in full armor. Their eyes were on her. She swallowed, her body tensing. The dragon had passed her something with that look, with that touch. A burden? A secret? Or an invitation? The leading figure raised a clawed hand. Harper Miles, the voice echoed, deep and resonant across the farm. You are summoned. Harper didn't move. Her hand stayed on the plasma torch. Her eyes narrowed. Summoned? By who? And why her? The sky above still shimmered faintly with the heat of the cruiser's arrival, but Harper didn't feel the heat. She felt a storm building, and somehow she was at the center of it. Harper didn't lower the plasma torch. Not yet. The armored Drakari stepped forward with unnatural grace for something so massive. Twin horns curled back from a sleek skull, and its scaled armor shifted as though it were breathing. The air shimmered around it with residual heat from the cruiser's landing. You are Harper Miles, it said again, voice controlled but heavy, like a waterfall threatening to flood. Confirm. Yeah, she answered finally, cautious. That's me. Who's asking? The Drakari didn't answer. Instead, it took a slow step forward, and behind it, more figures began to emerge. Half a dozen, all armed, but not with standard weapons. These were ceremonial. Polished. Decorated. That meant status. Nobility, maybe. Or worse, royalty. One of the figures, smaller, cloaked in blue and silver, moved to the front. Its armor was sleeker, less militant. Its eyes gleamed gold and intelligent beneath a half-mask carved with flowing script. A voice came from it, clipped and smoother than the first. I'm Enveritzing Theles, it said. Voice of the House of Sindrelmore. He who you aided at Tranquility Station. He who has named you. Name me. Harper asked warily. The right singer inclined its head. Yes, as Hearthbound. Her gut clenched. That term. She'd heard it once during her time aboard a carrier near the Drakari borders. A bonding rite. Rare, ancient, and not entirely understood by humans. It was a sacred acknowledgement, forged only in moments of utmost vulnerability. Sometimes as a debt, sometimes as more. I gave a tired old soldier my seat, she said. That's it. I didn't ask to be part of some ritual. Intent is irrelevant, said Thales. You performed a rite of offering in the presence of the grand scion of our house. No member of the ruling line has accepted such an offering in 4 centuries. Harper lowered the torch slightly. You're saying that old dragon was royalty? Not just royalty, said a voice from the side. She turned to see a human, tall, weathered, and wearing a battered exosuit with Earth Navy markings, though partially obscured by custom alien sigils. Commander Ray Alvarez, he said with a nod. I'm attached to Drakari Diplomatic Affairs. Been working liaison for 15 years. When the cruisers left orbit, I hitched a ride. You're going to want someone who speaks plain Terran. Harper arched a brow. That would be nice, yeah? Ray glanced at Thales, who gave him a slight nod of approval. The dragon you gave your seat to is High Lord Varix of Sindrelmore, Ray said. He's not just a ruler. He's the last living warblood of the Sovereign Flame, and more importantly, he hadn't set foot outside his isolation sphere in over a century. Until you. Harper shook her head slowly, the implications swirling too fast. I didn't do anything but show him some courtesy, which for the Drakari, Ray said, is equivalent to kneeling before a god and handing him your family blade. They don't take it lightly. They can't. The old High Lord's been dying for years. Every embassy expected he'd wither away in solitude, like the rest of his kind. But you changed that. The Rightsinger took over again. Your act of offering reignited the Lord's vow. He has named you Hearthbound. That bond is unrevoked. You now carry a mark that is visible to all his kin and enemies. Harper's voice was low. That sounds like a target. It is. Ray crossed his arms, boots crunching in the dirt. Words already spread across 3 systems. You're being watched, possibly hunted. But the old dragon didn't leave you defenseless. You've got his house's backing now, which is why we're here. You want me to come with you? We're not giving you a choice, Ray said. If you stay, your farm will be burned to the foundation before week's end. A rival house already tried to intercept our signal. This field's about to become a war zone. Harper looked back at the ridgeline, the barn, the half-repair droids, the grave where she buried her dog last winter. This had been her sanctuary, her plan B, her peace. You expect me to just walk onto one of your ships and leave everything behind? Yes, Thalas said. No, Ray said at the same time. He glanced at the envoy. That's not how humans work. Thalas' eyes narrowed, but said nothing. Ray stepped closer to her. You've got more than your life at stake now, Harper. That bond you triggered? Some houses see it as prophecy, others as an insult. Either way, it's going to spark conflict. Maybe war. Harper stared at him. So, I'm a symbol? You're a human who accidentally took a step into a power structure that doesn't forget kindness. Or betrayal. Varix didn't name you lightly. She was quiet for a long beat. Then, where is he now? On Syndral Moor, Thalas said. In the sacred chamber of the Ember Throne. Awaiting your presence. And your decision. What decision? To accept the bond fully. To become his hearthbound in truth. Harper blinked. You mean marry him? Ray coughed awkwardly. Not exactly. It's not romantic. It's more like political soul binding. You become part of his legacy. Part of his lineage. A symbol that the oldest flame still burns, and now it burns with humanity. Great, Harper muttered. So I become a flag. Thalas looked at her like she was something newly discovered. You become much more. If you survive. A sudden screech from the sky drew everyone's attention. Harper looked up. The stars above were shifting, black dots cutting through the fabric of space like ink dropped in water. Ships. Dozens of them. Not Terran. Not Drakari. These are not ours, Thalas said, eyes narrowing. They were the sigil of House Morval. Ray's face went pale. That's not good. Who are they? Harper asked. War purists, Ray said. They believe no bond should exist between humans and Drakari. They want the old bloodlines to end. They want Varix to die alone. They will see you as defilement. The cruisers dropped into the atmosphere with blazing trails, fast and precise. They're here to kill you, Thalas said plainly. Alarms flared on the main cruiser. Defensive grid activating, called a voice over the comm. Ray grabbed Harper's arm. We've got to go. Now. But Harper wasn't moving. She looked toward the landing field where a secondary shuttle was rising from one of the cruisers, ready to evacuate her. She looked toward her home, her crooked shed, her half-dead crops, her simple, chosen life. And then back at the sky, where death was descending like fire. She stepped forward toward the shuttle. But something in the back of her mind whispered, this is only the beginning.
The shuttle's interior was dimly lit, a controlled shade of blue meant to soothe the nerves during fast descents. But Harper wasn't soothed. She sat rigid in the crash harness, her fingers locked around the restraints while the floor trembled under her boots. Outside the reinforced windows, the sky had gone from lavender dusk to the boiling black of a planetary siege. House Morval's fleet had entered low orbit unchallenged. Dozens of their narrow, angular ships now fanned out across the upper atmosphere, and they hadn't fired a shot yet. That was worse than a bombardment. It meant they were sending a message. They wanted her alive, but scared, disoriented. She didn't know how much longer she could fake calm. Ray Alvarez sat across from her, checking a wrist console linked to the cruiser above. He looked like he'd aged a decade in the past 20 minutes. Orbital Intel just picked up a Morval command bark, he said without looking at her. They're sending an emissary down in person. Should I be flattered? Harper said flatly. They don't do this for negotiations, Ray muttered. They're coming to judge you. Harper rubbed her temples. I'm not royalty. I'm not a politician. I'm not even a good farmer. I gave an old dragon my seat. Ray looked at her finally. Exactly. That's why it matters. You didn't do it for power. That's why it terrifies them. The shuttle jolted as it docked into the belly of the command cruiser. Clamps hissed, gravity shifted, and the bay doors opened with a heavy sigh of decompression. They were met by Thales already waiting. The Drakari envoy's armor now shimmered with ceremonial red trim, a sign Harper guessed that things were about to escalate. Morval's emissary lands within the hour, Thales said. They demand her presence on neutral ground. Ray stiffened. Neutral? The Ember Arena, Thales replied. It has already been invoked. Harper frowned. Arena? An ancestral place of judgment, Thales explained. Trial by representation. Not violence, symbolism. Symbolism like? Like standing inside a circle while 1,000 armed warriors watch to see if your soul blinks, Ray muttered. Harper stared between them. So if I flinch, I'm guilty? If your posture conveys weakness, Thales corrected, you risk legitimizing their claim. They seek to undo the hearth binding, to strip Lord Varix of honor. If you are deemed unworthy, your death would follow shortly after. Silence followed. Fantastic, Harper said. Where's my courage enhancer? Is it in the minibar? No one laughed. The Ember Arena wasn't a stadium, it was a relic. Built into the side of a dormant volcano on a submoon above Sindral Moor, it was older than most human civilizations. The stone walls were black and ridged with lava scars. High above, silver banners fluttered, each marked with the seals of Drakari houses long extinct. Fire conduits ran beneath the floor, illuminating the arena with shifting red-orange pulses like a breathing beast. Harper stood in the central circle, a cracked ring carved from obsidian. Her breath fogged in the thin air. Around her, thousands of Drakari sat in tiered rows, watching in silence. She wore a simple robe. Nothing ornate. Just the same color as the day she gave up her seat, steel gray. The message was deliberate, unchanged intent. Thales stood beside her. Ray was off to the side with a data pad and a grim expression. Across the circle, a new figure approached. Tall, elegant, armored in dark green and ash gold. The Morval emissary. The creature's head crest flared slightly, a sign of distaste, and it moved with a predator's grace to the opposite edge of the ring. Silence followed its arrival. Then, in High Drakari, it began to speak. Thales translated quietly into Harper's ear. They claim you are an interloper. That Lord Varix's soul is compromised by human pity. They call for the right to be revoked. Harper kept her face blank. How do I respond? Thales nodded once and stepped forward. Speak your truth. Let them hear it unshaken. She stepped into the center of the ring. Alone. The emissary watched her. Thousands of ancient eyes bore into her. Harper felt like her skin would peel from the weight of it. She cleared her throat. I didn't come here to be a symbol, or a prophecy, or anything that sounds like the start of a holy war. I gave up my seat because someone looked tired. That's it. I didn't know who he was. I didn't want anything in return. No reaction from the emissary. No applause from the crowd. She inhaled slowly. But maybe that's the point. I didn't need to know who he was. I didn't treat him with respect because he was powerful. I treated him with respect because he looked human. Not in species, but in spirit. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. I'm not asking for your traditions. I'm not asking for a throne. But if that one small moment mattered to Varix, if it meant something to him, then I'm not walking away from it. The air trembled. The emissary stepped forward, eyes glinting. Thales whispered sharply, Be still. They are about to issue the final claim. The Morval raised a hand, and the arena dimmed. From behind them, from a side tunnel ringed with molten glyphs, came a procession of figures. Harper's breath caught. A platform of metal and crystal was being carried by 6 cloaked warriors. And on it, resting still and massive, was Lord Varix himself. He was dying. Even from across the ring, Harper could see the scales on his throat had begun to flake. His breath was shallow, barely rippling the heavy cloak over his chest. A golden chain linked his horns, and small motes of flame flickered weakly around his talons. The crowd murmured, low, reverent. The emissary turned to face the weakened lord, and then, in full view of all, raised a curved blade. "No!" Harper cried, but she wasn't fast enough. The Morval brought the blade down, not at Varix, but on his own palm. Blood poured into a small bowl. He turned and offered it to the central flame. Thalas hissed. "He invokes the right of severance." Harper's heart thundered. "What does that mean?" "It means," Ray said grimly from the side, "if the flame rejects your bond, you lose all protection. He's testing whether Varix's last will is strong enough to keep you alive." The flame pulsed as the blood hit the core. Then nothing. Then a roar. The flame erupted in gold and white, but not from the Morval's offering. From Harper herself. The ring at her feet ignited. A beam of fire, searing and wild, spiraled around her and into the heavens. The arena exploded in cries of shock and awe. Thalas dropped to one knee. Ray stared wide-eyed. You're channeling his flame." Harper couldn't move. She was floating. She felt everything, the despair of Varix, the dignity, the pain, and his last thought. "Live is my legacy." The flames wrapped her in a cocoon of gold, and as they vanished, Harper stood clad in ember-wrought armor. She wasn't human. Not anymore. The Morval emissary stepped back, stunned, and from behind them all, Varix spoke for the first time in months. "She is my successor."
The words echoed like thunder. "She is my successor." Silence fell across the Ember Arena. Not passive quiet, but a stunned stillness, like the universe itself had hit pause. Even the great banners above seemed to hesitate mid-sway. Lord Varix's voice had not only returned, it had carried. It rolled through the ancient stone walls like a memory coming alive. A declaration from someone long thought dead inside. Harper stood at the center, ember-armored and breathless. Her pulse thundered like the fire still laced through her veins. She could feel something inside her now, his flame. Not metaphorical, real, alive. It flickered in her chest like a second heart. The Morval emissary took a slow step forward, clearly reeling. His once arrogant poise cracked, and his voice came out brittle despite his best efforts to sound regal. "This is heresy," he hissed. "No outsider may hold the flame of sovereigns. It is bloodbound, soul-carved." But Varix was already rising from his platform. He moved like a mountain waking, slow but unstoppable. The weakness that once clung to his limbs fell away, burned by the rekindling of his vow. His eyes glowed deep crimson, and flame danced along his throat. "It is choice-bound now," Varix growled. "The old laws are dead. I buried them with my brothers in the Ember Wars. This human did what no heir could. She reignited the vow, and now I pass it on." He extended a clawed hand toward Harper, not to command, but to offer. "Take it, fully." Harper hesitated only a breath before stepping forward. Her hand fit into his massive talon like a spark falling into kindling. And the moment they touched, the arena erupted. Half of the crowd roared in fury. House Morval banners were shredded, their delegates leaping to their feet with weapons drawn. The others, those loyal to Sindrelmore or allied lines, raised their voices in answer, shielding the central ring with force fields and raising defense sigils. Ray cursed into his comm, "We're breaking protocol. This isn't symbolic anymore." A siren wailed across the upper levels of the arena. Dozens of Drakari warriors descended on anti-grav lifts, splitting into factions mid-air. "They're trying to assassinate her now," Thalas shouted, already forming a barrier of molten glyphs around Harper. A plasma bolt cracked the air and missed Harper by inches. She turned, instinct sharpened by the flame. A gesture, unconscious but immediate, brought up a wall of fire in midair. The blast sizzled harmlessly against it. Then she moved fast, faster than a human should, faster than she ever had. The armor responded to her will, forming wings of light and talons that mirrored Varix's own. Each breath summoned heat. Each motion redirected power. A Morval warrior landed beside her, snarling in some guttural dialect. He raised a cleaver-like weapon and lunged. She didn't even flinch. A burst of golden fire erupted from her palm, slamming into his chest and sending him cartwheeling into the arena wall. Around her, the old laws fell apart. The Ember Arena was no longer a place of words. It had become a battlefield. Ray ducked behind a fallen pillar and fired a pulse rifle borrowed from a loyalist. I thought this was supposed to be a non-lethal ritual. Thalos pulled him down just in time to avoid a spear. Drakari rituals are highly flexible when pride is wounded. Meanwhile, Varric stood in the ring, power coursing visibly through him. He wasn't fighting. He didn't need to. Just his presence kept half the opposition frozen in place. Harper landed beside him, heat rising from her shoulders. "You okay?" she asked. Varric's voice rumbled with something close to laughter. "You shine, Hearthbound, brighter than I ever did." Across the field, the Morval emissary threw back his hood. His eyes were wild with fury and desperation. "You've corrupted our oldest tradition. You've broken the sanctity of inheritance." "No," Varric said coldly. "She fulfilled it. Then die with her." The emissary's body flared, not with fire, but with something darker. Black flame. Void fire. Harper felt her spine ice over. "That's not Drakari fire, is it?" Varric growled. "It's stolen. From the deep houses. Forbidden magic." "Perfect," Harper muttered. Because this wasn't hard enough. The emissary rose off the ground, lifted by sheer force of will, surrounded by writhing darkness. Around him, the sky cracked as a Morval dreadnought decloaked, massive, jagged, and aimed directly at the arena. "Do we have shields?" Harper asked quickly. "Not against that kind of firepower," Ray called out. "One shot from that thing, and this entire moon is glass." The crowd began to scatter. Loyalists scrambled to evacuate nobles. Dissenters fled or fought on. In the middle of it all, Harper stood between the dreadnought and the old dragon beside her. Varric's breath came slow. "There is a way." "What is it?" "A union. Complete." She looked at him. "I thought I already accepted the bond." "You did, but not the flame. All of it. If you take it all, you may burn out. Or you may become something else." Harper didn't hesitate. She stepped forward. "Give it to me." Varric exhaled. Not in pain, in peace. And then the world ignited. Not in destruction, but in inheritance. The flame of sovereigns poured into her, layer after layer of ancient memory, of war and triumph, and sorrow and sacrifice. Generations of power lit every nerve in her body like solar flares behind her eyes. She didn't scream. She became. Her armor flared white-hot. Her wings doubled in size. Symbols etched themselves across her skin and lit with each breath. Then she launched, straight toward the dreadnought. The Morval ship fired. A lance of annihilation roared toward the arena. Harper caught it in midair. Not with tech, with will. The fire in her veins turned the beam aside, split it like water on a cliff, and hurled it back in a curved arc of golden light. It struck the dreadnought and tore it apart. The sky bloomed with fire. Below, the emissary screamed and fell to his knees, void flame dying on his hands. Harper landed beside him, eyes glowing like twin suns. "Your traditions are not stronger than compassion," she said quietly. "And I'm not afraid of your bloodlines. I meant something better." He tried to rise. She raised a hand, and the void flame snuffed out. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. As she stood in the center of the scorched ring, surrounded by silence and ruin, Varric's voice reached her one last time, soft, distant, proud. "My time ends. Yours begins. Reforge the galaxy, Hearthbound." The sky over the arena still shimmered with smoke and the golden embers of shattered tradition. The dreadnought's remains drifted in a slow, burning spiral above the submoon's surface like the last protest of an empire dying by its own arrogance. But within the scorched ring of obsidian, Harper knelt beside Varric. The old dragon's breath came in shallow bursts. His flame had been spent, given, and nothing now anchored him to the mortal world but willpower and memory. Harper rested one armored hand on his forelimb. "You knew this would kill you," she said, voice trembling. "I was dying before you ever gave up your seat," Varric rasped. "But I did not want to vanish as nothing. I wanted to matter once more." "You did," she whispered. "You do." His golden eyes, dimming slowly, looked into hers. Then rise, my hearthbound. Be what I could not. With that, Lord Varix, once sovereign of flame, gave a final breath and dissolved into light. Not ash, light. The thousands in the stands stood silent. Even the Morval rebels, leaderless now, watched with disbelief as the spark of Varix's essence flowed into the air, rising above Harper in a spiral of memory and fire. And then it vanished. Harper stood slowly, every part of her changed, not just in appearance but in weight. She felt history in her bones, power in her breath, responsibility in her posture. Ray approached, bruised and singed, but alive. He paused, glancing around. That was everything, Harper. Am I still Harper? She asked. Ray tilted his head. That depends. Are you still the kind of person who gives up her seat without thinking about what she'll get in return? Harper gave a slow nod. Then yeah, you're still Harper. Just on fire now. Thales joined them next. His armor dented, but pride unmistakable. You carry the flame, not as a weapon, but as a bridge, he said. That has not been done in generations. Perhaps never. I didn't mean to carry anything, Harper said softly. It was just supposed to be a good deed. A quiet moment. Thales looked out over the arena, then turned back to her. There are no quiet moments anymore. Not for you. The next few days unfolded in a haze of politics, cleanup, and reluctant admiration. The Morval delegates were placed under arrest, pending war crime investigations. House alliances across the sector began to shift, with many now openly denouncing the deep-line purity rules that had defined interstellar nobility for centuries. The flame of sovereigns was declared awakened, and Harper, a human from an off-grid agricultural moon, was named Flame-Bearer. She declined all royal titles. She didn't want a throne, a fleet, or a palace. Instead, she made one single demand. Let me go home. When the cruisers descended upon her farm again, they came not in intimidation, but in protection. The charred earth around her barn had already been cleaned up. New soil was imported from Syndromore, rich with ash and minerals, and infused with regenerative growth sequences. A monument stood now at the edge of her field, a simple stone carved with the image of a coiled dragon and a girl seated beside him. Beneath it, the words, "Compassion rewrites bloodlines." Harper walked the rows of her field slowly, her cloak catching on the wind. Children from nearby colonies visited often now. They brought questions instead of weapons. Did he really choose you? Can you still do fire stuff? Are you immortal now? To most, she answered kindly but vaguely. But to one small Drakuri girl, whose scales shimmered silver blue, she knelt down and whispered, "He chose me because I didn't try to be chosen. That's the whole secret." The girl nodded like she understood, even if she didn't fully yet. Ray, now operating as her logistics liaison, his words, approached from the nearby cruiser hangar, where a makeshift command post had been set up for diplomatic visits. "We got another delegation coming in," he said, "this time from House Valzir. Apparently, they want to offer you an honorary seat in their war council." "Decline," Harper said. "They also offered a fleet." "Decline," louder. Ray snorted. "You know, they're just trying to stay on your good side now, right?" Harper gave a faint smile. "Then they can start by planting trees instead of bombs." He nodded approvingly. "The flame suits you." "I'm not using it unless I have to," she said, glancing at her palm. It still glowed faintly when she focused. Fire isn't for ruling. It's for warming, reminding people there's still something worth growing. Ray tilted his head. Philosophical. "I like it. Still, might want to keep the whole blasted dreadnought from orbit thing in your back pocket. Only if someone tries to cut in line at the spaceport again," she teased. Then she grew quiet. "Do you think he knew it would ripple this far?" Ray looked up at the sky. He was old. He'd seen stars burn out and empires fall. I think he was ready to believe one more time that something small could change something big. "And I was the small thing," Harper murmured. "You were the spark," Ray corrected. They stood together at the edge of the field, watching the wind bend through the new green stalks. Peace, for the first time in months, felt real. And yet, as Harper looked to the stars, her eyes narrowed. Somewhere out there, beyond the Morval, beyond the deep houses, she sensed another presence watching, waiting. It wasn't over. Not yet, because the flame had been reawakened. and not all would welcome its return. Harper turned back toward her home, but she didn't put her armor away. Not this time. Time passed as it always does. In the years following the Battle of the Ember Arena, the galaxy did not burn. It changed. The flame of sovereigns did not vanish into another noble's bloodline or fade into forgotten ceremony. It pulsed quietly in the heart of a human farmer who never wanted to be a symbol, but became one anyway. Harper Wade. The name was spoken across thousands of systems, first in confusion, then with awe, and finally with reverence. At first, the major houses sent delegations to court her power. Then came the scholars and biographers. Then came the frightened warlords who believed humanity had developed a weapon beyond reason, the ability to inspire dragons. They weren't entirely wrong, for what followed was not just political. It was cultural. It was spiritual. Drakari children in cities once ruled by the ancient deep houses now lit small hearth fires and whispered her name before speaking. Ceremonial armor changed. Designs once exclusive to Drakari were now forged with Terran flourishes. Wings of flame and steel began to appear on military banners. And it didn't stop with the Drakari. Other species began to ask the question Harper had never meant to plant. What if nobility isn't inherited? What if it's chosen? From the frost-rimmed world of Ultron to the jungled moons of Shostrax, revolts began, not in violence, but in belief. Farmers refused to bow. Artists sculpted dragons with human faces. Inquisitors sent to stamp out the heretic flame, often returned converted. The House Morval tried to silence it with counter-propaganda. They mocked humans, dismissed the story, even declared Harper's ascension an illusion manufactured by flame tech and narcotic ritual. But by then, statues had already risen. The tallest was on Syndrel Moor, a monument carved from molten glass, towering above the old arena, depicting a human woman with outstretched hands and a slumbering dragon curled around her feet. On its base, the flame is not inherited. It is given freely. Ships began to carry the phrase across the stars, sometimes in etched sigils, sometimes painted boldly on hulls. It became a motto, a creed, and quietly, humans began receiving invitations, not to be ruled, but to lead. Back on Earth, the governments didn't know what to make of it. Harper's story had leaked slowly at first. Rumors passed from mercenaries, distant transmissions. But once official footage reached Terran systems, everything shifted. What's a dragon? Became, how do we train diplomats like Harper? Agricultural communes in South America held community viewings of the final arena battle, analyzing her stances like religious scholars. Young engineers in Nairobi created exosuits inspired by her armor. A film trilogy was announced within weeks, The Ember Gift, though Harper refused to participate. I don't want to be entertainment, she told them. Not for this. Instead, she returned to her farm. She still cultivated soil, still patched irrigation systems, still fed her goats. But her home became a pilgrimage site. Leaders from distant systems came not for treaties, but to ask questions. How do we rule with compassion? How do we earn loyalty without blood? How did you survive the flame? To each, she gave the same answer. I didn't survive it. I shared it. The unintended consequences weren't all peaceful. The flame's awakening shook things buried for centuries. Old species, hidden in the void between galaxies, began to stir. Those who remembered the first dragons and their wars. One signal emerged from the hollow belt, a region long thought lifeless. A ship, black as obsidian and older than language, emerged from the dark. Inside was no crew, only a recording, in a dialect no one had heard in 60,000 years. The sovereign flame rises again. We remember. We are coming. Most thought a threat. Some believe it a warning. A few, like Harper, suspected it was both. She didn't fear it. Not anymore. The flame inside her had become steady. Not consuming, but guiding. Not a weapon, but a beacon. Let them come, she said once, when asked about the signal. I'll be here, and I won't be alone. And she wasn't. Restay, of course. He built a full satellite array over her land, joking that if gods came calling, at least they'd have decent comms. Thales became the ambassador between Earth and the Syndral remnants, drafting the first shared alliance of flame between humans and dragons. And a child, Drakari-human hybrid, was born on the station orbiting Varix's old tomb. She was named Asha, a word from Old Earth, meaning hope. Harper wasn't her mother, not biologically, but she was the first word Asha ever spoke. A whole generation was growing now under a different banner. No longer just alien. No longer just human. Flame-born. They wore no crowns. They owned no planets. But wherever injustice rose, so did they. Some were trained by Harper herself. Others only heard the stories. But it was enough. Centuries passed. The last human who had ever known Harper personally died in orbit above a planet she'd never seen. Even then, she died smiling, her last words recorded as, "Tell them, she wasn't a queen. She was better." By then, Earth was no longer ignored or mocked. It was a cradle, a place where improbable miracles seemed to emerge every few generations, where ordinary people touched the stars and reminded the galaxy what resilience looked like. Some species still feared them. Others revered them. Many just tried to understand them. And across every world that had once worshipped bloodlines and dominion, a simple monument could often be found. A bronze bench, a carved seat, sometimes warm to the touch, sometimes not. On it, only one line. She gave up her seat. In the deep black between stars, a whisper lingered, uncertain in origin, but clear in tone. No name, no planet, no faction, just this. Long after the war ended, long after the dust settled, alien historians searched for the truth. But the records were incomplete, the names lost. All that remained were whispers among the stars, of a species that never surrendered, never knelt, never stopped.